Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another Social Blueprint interview. Friends, we all know Grant Blashki as the face of Beyond Blue. But we're here to discuss so much more about you because you truly are a man of all seasons. You have so many eclectic interests, but at the same time, I think a lot of them very much go back to Jewish values. And here to talk all about it, Grant, welcome.
Great. Very excited to be on the Social Blueprint. I had a bit of a look at some of your previous videos. You're doing great work and happy to have a chat with you, Greg.
Great. Hey, Grant, one of the areas that people I have a feeling do not know a lot about you, but I think is very topical. In case you don't know, there is a massive record-breaking heat wave going on right now in the Northern Hemisphere. And Grant, you really are a conservationist as well as doing stuff for Beyond Blue. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that aspect of your life?
Yeah, look, I'm very worried about climate change. And at the University of Melbourne, I run a master's course called Planetary and Global Health. It's a subject. We've been running that for about 10 years, and we talk about climate change and water and sanitation and all these big pressures on the environmental systems. And as you say, I mean, heat wave in the Northern Hemisphere, and recently, in Australia, we had the biggest fires in 2019, 18 million hectares burned.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. And the big scientific reports, the one called the IPCC, it's sort of the main report that comes out, they were saying we're already 1.1 degree above global averages. Doesn't sound like much. You think, 1 degree, great, I'll put on a different jumper.
Not even.
I'll leave my jumper off. But the problem is it's an organic system, and what we're seeing is these weather patterns that are playing out at the moment. So we can see it with our eyes, we're hearing it from the research, and I think a lot of people in the community have really woken up and gone, it's pretty serious, what are we doing?
Yeah, well, certainly that 1 in 100 year event seems to take place every 18 months now. And I don't think it takes a scientist per se to notice something is going on. But could I ask you, it still is a bit vague. What can we do on an individual level, without getting very scientific about it, please, just to help this situation? Is there we always want actionable takeaways.
Yeah, so look, I think it's really important, and we want to make sure that when people hear about these, pretty scary environmental issues, that they don't find it paralyzing. They think, what can I do about it? But there are things that individuals can do. You can do stuff at home in terms of, slowly people are electrifying their houses.
Right.
People are putting solar panels on, less waste, thinking about where your food comes from, thinking about your transport, how you get around, where possible, riding, all this stuff. But the truth is that our individual efforts are important, but we also need big government policy, international agreements to really lock it in. I mean, the really exciting thing at the moment is businesses are getting serious about this.
Yes.
You've seen just in the last few months, big Australian businesses, whether it's Coles, Bunnings, talking about net zero emissions. So it's gone out of the world of just individual efforts and really this extraordinary societal transformation, which is happening and starting to happen. Very exciting.
Yeah, and I'm in the share market, and I know we are constantly looking at companies that have what is their ESG credentials, and I'm sure that is part of it. So from your point of view, are you optimistic that we are going to, I don't know if the word solve the problem is the right word, but at least have a good effort at it?
Look, I've got a terrific student who was in our masters. He's a young Jewish doctor, and he said to me, he goes, I think all efforts are worth it because, 2 degrees rise is going to be a lot better than 3 degrees or 4 degrees. So it's not a binary thing. Like, the more we can do, the quicker we can do it, the better. And a country like Australia is actually a very dry continent, very vulnerable to climate change. So all the efforts are important. And I love this idea that, we're going to see change at the scale of the technological revolution, like phones. 2007, none of us had an iPhone, and they're everywhere now. But the scale is going to be massive, and the speed at which things are changing. So I imagine, my beautiful new little grandson will probably ask me when I'm 10, he'll go, so do you think did you drive around with petrol and put smoke in the sky? What were you thinking? So things are changing very quickly. It's great.
Yeah, and I think that is a sense of optimism, and also in a certain way, I think it actually has brought a sense of community as well, because we all know that we are in this together.
Yeah, look, one of the areas I work on is that intersection between environmental worry and keeping a sense of hope.
Right.
And I like to talk about the hope budget, because, when you give a talk to people, there's no good if they come out feeling demotivated and, oh, okay, we're all stuffed. Let's party.
Right. Exactly.
You actually want people to come out feeling motivated, and it's not too late. And this decade's very important. And I also think we have to be careful at the moment. We're all very much lost in, our digital worlds online. And that can be quite overwhelming, particularly for our young people, where you're just getting pinged with bad news and the algorithm's sending you more and more bad news. So I would curate some of that stuff. Don't follow people that you're finding too upsetting. Focus on some of the good things that are happening, and know when to put your phone away. And to just make sure that you're giving your mind a chance, and focus on what you can do. Not
a sense of agency.
That's right. Not one single person can actually fix this. It's a group thing, and there'll be your little piece of the puzzle you can do. Focus on that. But beyond that, make sure that if you're worrying too much about it, take a step back. Keep things in perspective. Humanity's had some pretty tough gigs in the past. I'm sure when my parents were born, after the Second World War, they thought, wow,
yes,
what's happening in the world, So I think that sort of apocalyptic perspective you've got to be a bit careful of, and put your energy into actually sorting it out. If you're a young person listening to this, educate yourself. There's a great need for young people to be part of this huge transformation.
Yes.
If you're going to be a great engineer or a public health educator or someone who wants to work in policy or international relations, whatever you want to do, climate and protecting the environment is going to be part of it. So we need excellent, smart, inspiring people. So work hard.
Yes, and I certainly notice within the young people that sense of really wanting to give back more than ever. But also part of that group, switching now over towards Beyond Blue, a hard right turn, I should say. You deal with a lot of tough issues, and obviously the issue of our time is COVID right here, right now. And hopefully we're coming out of it on the other side of it, but we're going to start to feel the ramifications that we frankly can't analyze. I'm just curious, we all know that it's affecting everybody, and it has. But starting out from a demographic age perspective, have you noticed any certain trends taking place, say with like older people or younger people or so forth?
Yeah, there's a really good study done every year by Mission Australia that looks at 20,000 young people, and they look at what are the 3 top things that worry them. And
right.
This year it was mental health, COVID, and social justice. And climate not far behind. And those Gen Zers are really worried about what's going on, and these things aren't disconnected either. There's a concept coming through public health now called planetary health, which is the name of our course, which says that humanity, of which there's so many of us now,
right.
3.5 billion when I was born, 7.5 billion now, like one lifetime.
Right.
And we're putting pressures on the planetary systems, whether it's the climate. COVID can actually be understood as another example of a planetary health issue, as human activities have sort of pushed us further into, forests and mixing between animals and humans, so what we call the zoonotic diseases. So a lot of these things that are going on can be understood as this sort of pressure
right.
Of a very, consumptive species, which we are, and we're pushing hard on the systems. But just to your point, I think during COVID, the mental health of a lot of people really got pushed around.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people who sort of thought, hey, mental health, whatever, suddenly they found themselves stuck at home and really met the limits of their capacity. They couldn't sleep, they lost routine, and they really got in a bit of a mess. And I went, That's what they're talking about.
Right.
So a couple of things I'd like to say about that. I mean, Beyond Blue was great. Very early on, the government funded us to set up a COVID mental health support service with a phone line, and it just went off.
Which I understand is overwhelmed.
Well, we had 30% increase on what we'd had before on our support services, and Beyond Blue was really proud to step up. And to credit to the Australian government, they didn't get everything perfect, but they realised early on, hey, mental health, this is going to be a big mental health issue.
Yes.
Put some money into that. So that was great. But I also just want to mention, given the, thinking about the social blueprint and Judaism, the Jewish community, had a sort of a depth of connection that really helped with resilience during COVID. We had deep roots of connection with family and community, looking after
more so than other communities, in your opinion?
Well, I think many of the ethnic communities do, but I think I'm very grateful as someone who's grown up in Melbourne, Australia, to have had the benefit of this extraordinary sort of buffet of services. You have babies, here's a creche. By the way, here's a good school. And when they're finished with that, why don't they go to this youth movement? And if your parents are getting old, don't worry, we've got the perfect service. And, And
you'll get 3 opinions about it too.
Yeah, that's right. Cradle to grave, like amazing. And the only thing I would say, the Jewish community, and I know, some young people will be watching it, it's mostly a blessing, but it can be a bit annoying in your 20s in particular, like the expectations. What I call the wedding interrogation. You're just sitting there, you're having your chicken or fish, whichever you picked. And so what are you doing? And when are you getting married? And, there can be quite a lot of, competitive, aspirational sort of pressure, which can be quite annoying for young people as well. So you got to get the balance.
And also a lot of, I think, uncertainty in that age category, because if you think about it, from the time you're basically born to you're called 21 years old, there's been a very, very, very clear path. Now all of a sudden you're out of that path. And that brings me to the point of right now, I think there is so much uncertainty out there in the world. And I think that people don't know, from the seemingly little things of their flights being canceled. How do you advise people to handle uncertainty?
Yeah, look, it's a good question generally, and I also want to come back to Judaism.
Yes.
Look, uncertainty is there, and I think humanity has had the most extraordinary time since the Industrial Revolution, where we are apparently so in control of everything, to the point where a couple of years ago, can you believe my 300-ton plane is 5 seconds late and they haven't got any more coffee? We became
little precious.
We call it low frustration tolerance, right? We can't deal with anything going wrong. I think there is that element where we just have this illusion of how much control we have. But you only have to look a little bit back in history, and humans have always been part of nature. We've had a lot more uncertainty. Life expectancy was a lot lower. We had all these diseases which would, unfortunately knock off half the children before they got 5 years old, So we live in this beautiful time, incredible benefits of science and civil society and humanism, and yet, nature still wins, and it will come around and remind us. So what can you do? I think shift your expectations and realise that, we're not actually in control of everything. Zoom out a bit. I think there's a lot to be said about speaking to some of the older generations as well. Again, as Jewish community, we, for millennia, have been knocked about.
Yes.
Pogroms, the Holocaust,
We're the definition of resilience.
We get knocked about, so really, in the great scheme of things, pandemic, not great, not loving it, been pretty tough on our young people. I'm not patronising them and diminishing it. It was pretty hard to get stuck at home, and they missed out on a beautiful time of their lives. But on the other hand, people bounce back.
Yes.
And they are very resilient. I think the Jewish people are very resilient.
Right.
And, we just have this history and sense of connection, which is just extraordinary. You think, when you read the Torah and we're fighting the Canaanites and the Ammonites, Where are they all? There's none of them. Like
Right,
they're all
exactly.
gone, you know. So we're annoyingly persistent and resilient, and you know, people they come back. So I think the other thing is people's relationship to the religion. You
Right.
know, in my case, I'm not deeply religious in the literal sense.
Right.
You know, I'm quite a humanist and strong, rational sort of scientific background.
Right.
And yet, I put on my tefillin every morning, which some might find surprising.
Same.
Is you love it, and I love it, and it's anchoring. And you know, before gratitude was like a trendy sort of mindfulness thing, I'm like, okay, this is beautiful. I'm awake, and I list, you know, my beautiful family and friends and think prosperity and free country. And it's a bit of a reset of appreciation. So, you know, I think that the anchoring of a beautiful religion like Judaism is wonderful. Whatever your sort of, you know, literal philosophical beliefs may be. Yeah, but I think there's great value in Jewish culture, Jewish values. And for my mind, I find them very helpful in the areas I work in.
Same.
You know, I find... obviously as a GP, which is about compassion and getting out of your own skin and putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you know, very sort of Jewish idea.
Yes.
But even I really like some of those Jewish sayings which have resonated for me when I work in these sort of planetary health areas, which are pretty confronting. Well, I can't remember the exact how the Hebrew goes, but it's something to the effect of it's not for you to complete the work of perfecting the world, but you're not free to desist from that.
Exactly.
See, you're not going to solve it all. You know, when I'm at the Heifer and they're saying nice things about me, putting some dirt on me, whatever, I won't have solved it all. We know that.
Right.
It's okay. But what's the little bit you can do? Who are the people you can help? So I really like that idea, and I think it's a really useful one when you're tackling very challenging issues.
Yeah, because, you know, and clinically, I suppose, when you think about gratitude, it's very hard to talk to somebody that is going through hell to be gracious. It almost could seem, frankly, condescending.
Mm-hmm.
I personally find in the Jewish religion, because I'm commanded to effectively have gratitude, it seems to solve the problem for me. But is that something that we can take to a wider community, this sense of gratitude, at the same time not seeming really, frankly, condescending?
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point about helping someone who's having a hard time, I think you're right. It's tricky, you know, and you will see people, you know, in Australia, in 1 year, on average, 2 million people have an anxiety condition, 1 million have depression. So you'll know people in your family, your friends, or yourself, or someone listening, right?
It's about 15% of the population for the
Yeah, so it's everywhere, right? So if you want to help someone, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to be a psychologist, but you can ask someone how they're going.
Right.
Pick a good time. You know, just say, look, I've noticed you don't seem to be sleeping lately, or I've noticed you haven't been coming into work, or you're not answering calls. How you going? And then the hard thing, especially for your Jewish audience, is to just shut up at that point.
Yes.
And not come in and go, you should do this, you should try that.
Grant, can you repeat that again?
No, because we want to, right? But if you
everybody
can
wants to help.
Sit back, not share your own story, going, oh, what happened with me? Just let them tell their story, and then ask them, say, what do you think would be most helpful? And it might surprise you. It might not be what you think. They might say, look, if you can take the kids in the morning, it'd be awesome. Or, you know, if we could just, you know, move. I need to move out of Melbourne or wherever you are. You know what? But find out what they think would help them. And also, if it's more serious, maybe link them into Beyond Blue.
Right.
Maybe go along to a GP. You know, in Australia, GPs can do this thing called a GP mental health plan. And that will enable you Medicare subsidised sessions with a psychologist, which for a lot of people is a really good thing. So between 6 right up to 20 sessions if you need, and speak to a mental health expert. So I think that those supports in Australia are amazing, and the GPs are often a good gatekeeper, or you can ring Beyond Blue and just get that conversation started.
And do you think also the stigma of having some mental anxiety, it feels to me like it is much more out in the open now. Do you see it that way as well?
Yeah, look, fortunately, my dad, who's retired now and he's well, thank God, he worked as a GP and then later as a psychiatrist and did some of the first studies of GP management of depression. And we sometimes chat about comparing the 1960s to the 2020s. There's no way a big guy would rock in and go, oh, I think I've got depression, doc.
Right.
It's not going to happen, right? Whereas now I work as a GP in St Kilda, you know, the blokes will come in and say,
right.
yeah, I haven't slept. I think maybe I'm depressed. They know about it. So literacy's gone up. Public figures, footy players,
Yes.
famous people. I think that I always say one footy player talking about mental health is worth about 1,000 professors. Like it just gets the message out there, you know?
Right.
And, you know, so people are much more literate. Having said that, just a side point there, I think it's important for young people in particular not to medicalise everyday human experience. So we can see, you know, while we've reduced stigma, that, you know, some young people confuse being sad with, oh my gosh, I've got depression.
Right.
No, you're sad. Broke up with your girlfriend.
Right.
That's sad. I've got exams.
You're going to have a tough 2 months.
That's worry. You don't have an anxiety condition. So, you know, getting the balance.
And yeah, and you know, and I'm just curious, asking here as a parent, how do you handle what I'd call the honey and vinegar aspect, which is that obviously everyone's having issues, and on one hand you want to be compassionate, on the other hand, as you mentioned earlier, you have to get on with life. And you hear these stories about, you know, in the Jewish religion, so many Holocaust survivors never spoke about it for 30 years plus, just never mentioned a word, yet they seem to have had success. But how do you balance out those two factors?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Plug for our conference, which we're running in Israel in September. I don't
Please
know
do.
when your video comes out, but we have a video conference with Hadassah Hospital and led by Professor David Forbes, who runs Phoenix, the Post-Traumatic Stress Center, which talks all about how people cope with, you know, really traumatic situations. And there's no one rule to it.
Okay.
I think it's hard with young people. It feels like that cliche, doesn't it, where the people are going, well, eat your dinner, there are people starving on the other
Yes.
side of the world. You're probably not going to get very far with that.
And I walked uphill 5 miles each way to school in the cold.
Yeah. That's right. When we were young, like that Monty Python skit,
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
lived in a paper bag. So, you know, I think that one's a bit tricky.
Okay.
But I do think that with young people, a couple of general things that I think are really useful. So I think during the pandemic, I think the social isolation and the disconnection was really quite significant and very difficult. So I think helping with reconnection with their friends, you know, making regular arrangements with good friends, making that a priority.
Right.
And dare I say, you know, getting a break from some of the screen time. I know that their world is often the screen. It's not just a supplement. But, you know, being out in the real world with real people is good. Exercise, amazing. Eating well. And the other thing I'd just talk about briefly is, I think, in terms of career, you know, for some of the slightly older kids who've done it pretty hard,
Right.
getting towards the end of school, early uni days. And I think helping them find something they're really excited about and, you know, helping nurture that. Because one of the best sort of antidotes to that sense of uncertainty is that really strong sense of purpose and excitement about changing things. And so, you know, if you can help create that spark, I think that can be really good.
It sparks, it's obvious that you have optimism all over you. It resonates from the second you walk into a room. Is that something that's innate, or have you purposely cultivated that?
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, I think people's temperaments are different,
Right.
as you would see. You might have a few children, I've got a few children. You know, people's temperaments are different. I've got a fairly happy temperament, but I had some pretty stormy times too in my teenage and, you know, like we all do. So I don't think I've had, you know, some sort of Buddhist, you know, guru-y sort of personality. Actually, it's interesting. I was thinking about this too. It's very popular for a lot of our young people, and I'm interested too in Eastern philosophies,
Right.
and meditation and mindfulness, and I do a lot of Tai Chi, and I love it, and I think there's a lot to be gained from it. But I've sort of become aware also that I think Judaism's more of a struggle, right? Like, I don't know that we land at nirvana. We're busy looking for good coffee. We never quite get there, where there's this restlessness battle that I'm pretty sure at this point in my life is going to continue. I'm not expecting any time to just go, I found peace. So, it's a very Jewish thing, I think.
You could ask my wife, it's a battle every day.
Yes. I love that joke about, there's 5 Jewish guys sitting at the cafe and the waiter comes up and goes, "Is anything okay?" Anyway, I think, they're stereotypes, obviously. But I do think there's a restlessness that is actually a good thing, a sort of a constant discourse that goes on within the community, within that rich Jewish life, which sort of pushes and asks why and demands and doesn't actually just sort of accept the status quo thing, which I think is not a bad thing.
Well, that's the Gemara at its core. Hillel and Beis Shammai arguing every day, but yet they were best friends.
Yeah, that's right. It's just, I think it's in our DNA, I don't know, or in our culture, whatever. But it's certainly part of Judaism, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, the other concept, I said that some of my work and activities have been quite well informed by Jewish ideas.
Yes.
I love that. Speaking of Hillel, that quote, "If I'm not for myself, who will be? And if I'm only for myself, what am I?"
Correct.
I think that's very relevant at the moment. I mean, we're all in this game, me included, of this intense sort of narcissism on social media and, self-promotion and all that. As I said, I'm not pointing the finger, I'm part of it. But there's something a bit that rings not right for most of us. We know there's something not quite right about it all.
For sure.
That we don't want to lose that basic sense of community that I think the Jewish community has and the Australian community has, which really looks after the broader community. It's not all about yourself, not all me, consumerism,
Well, one of my sayings is that everything can be used for the good or the bad. So really, I suppose it depends on how we go about it.
Oh, yeah, I like that idea. It's very true. That's a nice one. Yeah.
Great. As I said, you're an extremely eclectic person. I wanted to talk about something that probably most people don't know about you. You're in a band.
Oh, yeah, I do play music. I love music. I think it's a lovely way to connect. I love the spirituality of it. I love the skill. Like all through lockdown, I was having Zoom saxophone lessons and playing out the window to passerbys. Interesting, I've got a new form of busking where, busking, usually people pay you to play. I have a little so they can pay me and I'll stop. No, it's just a bit of fun. I like the connections, and I have some really good mates that I play with, and we enjoy the music that we're playing. We're not giving up our day jobs. And I love all the Jewish music as well. I love all those sort of minor scales and stuff. I think beautiful, soulful sort of music.
Well, we're disproportionately, represented in the arts for sure.
Yeah, we're definitely have contributed into, that area of jazz that I like and some of the other areas. I mean, that's the other message maybe you can say to like some of the young people is as annoying as our community can be, it's also an incredible network of fantastic people, whatever your area is. If you're just in business or you're interested in medicine or teaching or arts or science or, trades, whatever it is, reach out to mentors, because those networks are just absolutely gold. And if someone takes you under their wing, and most people like to talk about themselves, so you can cold call people and just go, "Hi, I'm really interested. I was having a look at your website. Would you mind if I interviewed you? briefly, or a quick coffee, my shout. So, I think for young people, there is a lot to be learned, and our community is extraordinary.
Yes.
And there's some really fantastic people out there.
Yeah, it's surprising how, and again, when it comes to technology, access to the world's best, literally the world's best, has never been easier.
Yeah, it's really extraordinary, isn't it? The sort of connections that are happening. I think it's a mixed blessing because there's so much there that I think some young people and older people are just overwhelmed. Like, where do I start? It's like you've arrived at the infinite buffet and you can't find the bagels.
Guilty as charged.
Right. It just goes forever. And so I think that's where, at some point, sifting out what is it that I really care about? What do I really want to do? But here's the trick. Work out what you're going to not do. Because having a not to do list, I found a really interesting and valuable sort of productivity approach. So once I worked out, I'm interested in medicine, mental health, environment. They're my things, right?
A few things to tackle.
All right, they're my big things, right? That's probably too much already.
Get them done before lunch today.
And, do my little tiny piece of the puzzle. So park the grandiosity, right? Like, nobody's going to do it all. You do your little bits of it. But then also decide, well, I'm going to stop doing other things, and I think in terms of sort of managing your time and finding a real focus that you're excited about, when you find your thing that you love, like, get obsessed with it, get absolutely obsessed with it, get sugar with it. It's like water on a rock, and you'll get great at it and opportunities will happen.
Excellent. Hey, Grant, we could spend all day here, but unfortunately we have to go. Do you have any closing remarks for people?
Gosh, closing remarks. My closing remarks, I guess, with the social blueprint and thinking about the Jewish community is I certainly have tremendous appreciation of the giants whose shoulders I've been able to stand on, from going to a beautiful Jewish school to being part of this community.
Yes.
And, through the connections and social connections and those sort of things. So, use that. Get involved in the community. I think it's a great idea and it's something really special to value.
Thank you very much, everybody. I have no doubt that there are at least 5, 6, 7 more nuggets that you can take out of this conversation today.